Hello and welcome to Skeleton Songs.
Earlier than I was expecting.
I know, there's a reason for that.
He's supposed to wait for 3 seconds just so I have time to trim the audio.
I saw her count down to 2 and then I rushed in.
So this means that you've got the mink. You want to explain to the ladies and gentlemen what the mink is?
Well, when one is feeling a little minky, then one has the mink. That's clear enough, I think. How are you, my darling?
I'm fine, I'm not minky. What have you been up to? You've been writing this week.
I have been writing like a bastard into...
Who would have thought, a year into making this game, when the game is all about the story and the writing and the text, our writer has started doing the words.
Except it's back and forth, and I get that look on my face when you say, are you doing something complicated? I'm like, yes! When I'm jumping back and forth between code and writing, which is hard work, but very fruitful, because, you know, the downside of being... no longer the only programmer in this project. Roman came in and helped us out with some menu work.
You made it beautiful, Roman, thank you.
But the primary tech and also the only writer is a lot of stuff has to squeeze through my brain. But the advantage is it's much easier for me to write a spec for myself and to understand it and to alter the spec when I realise that things need doing differently. And this is, I think I've said before, the first project where the tooling I've done to support the content I'm really happy with, and I don't feel like I should have spent more time with it. You know, it's rough around the edges in places, but it's very happy. But that's all a bit waffly. The key thing is I'm settling down to implement the skeleton of all the core plot beginning to end. So I've had it all planned out for a while, and now I'm building in conversations, like laying down train tracks, oddly enough, with placeholder NPCs in all the relevant scenes. Some of the placeholder scenes. Some of the conversations are a bit more fully fleshed out. Some are just, have you come here to do the thing? Yes, do your thing. Okay, advanced plot flag. But I'll do that all the way through to our probably 5 endings. And it's really valuable. It like draws a chalk line around the whole game to show what we absolutely need to do and then what we can fill out with alternate paths and things. And it's very gritty in terms of having me think through the actual interactions between the variables. If you've accepted this offer from this person, at which point does the other offer get withdrawn in the other conversation? If you've done one of these 3 tasks, how many meetings do you have to determine when the tasks are finished? All this sort of stuff. So it's all the crunchy detailed plot stuff. But what I keep on doing is I said to myself, I'm going to spend no more than 2 weeks on this, but it's going to be an absolute minimal skeleton. And I keep getting excited and diving off into the content and characterization, because that's more fun and I have an idea I want to implement now. But so I'm making progress, but I think end of next week or end of the week after, depending on how tempted I get to write the actual content, we'll have the game, like, in theory, playable from the beginning to the end, with very heavy quote marks around the playable. Yeah. You know, I mean, like I say, you know, the conversation is, have you come here to advance the plot flag? Yes, I have. Okay, tick up.
Yeah, I keep going into Unity to find quotes for marketing and seeing lots of Fnord. But it is really encouraging seeing the skeleton come together.
Just for those of you who don't know what Fnord is, it's a reference to a work of esoteric mid-20th century literature where the Illuminati condition children not to be able to see the word Fnord, so they'll paint on the side of their vans so they can do their dark work at night. And I picked up from an old friend the habit of using it as a marker in conversations and content that I could just search for when it says this is to do.
That's a good system. But yeah, it's encouraging to so we're sort of combining your skeleton content with a bunch of skeleton scenes in Unity. So we are now travelling around the map, moving Spencer from location to location according to narrative requirements, which is great. And of course, the game basically looks like someone's tripped over a Lego box at this point, but it is actually starting to resemble a game. And now we've got the shape, it turns less into a sort of Imaginarium situation where anything could happen and nothing exists, into a basically colour in the lines exercise. And that is, I think, for us at least, a very rewarding part of development, which is good because it's going to go on for at least a year.
I was thinking today, when you're working out the initial storyline for something like this, feels a lot like digging a mine, because it's hard work and you can go in any direction, you don't know where you're going to end up. And then at some point, most of the tunnels are dug, and you can still go back and dig more or expand them, but you generally have this shape that you can then fill with, I don't know, I guess from Moria or somewhere, so dwarves and mithril and barrel-proof doors.
I think Moria is quite a good metaphor for game dev, really, because if you delve too greedily and too deep, usually you get yourself in a pickle, whereas if you're sensible and hard-working, you get all those lovely columns.
You do, and then I think the thing is,
and Pippin comes in and buggers it all up.
I think the metaphor really works because, as we've said variations on before, not everyone, the temptation is going into a project thing, I'll fulfil all the possible ambitions, but at some point you have to stop before you hit, in Dwarf Fortress terms, the lava or the hidden terrors. And it's very hard to know exactly when to stop. Apart from, then you always say, which is when you run out of money. Away from that. The other thing about you said it looked like somebody stripped over a box of Lego, and it's true, but it's also sort of haunted Lego. Because at the moment, when I put in an NPC to talk to, I'm just cloning OBR, but there's a temporary nameplate that says somebody else's name over the head, so you can tell it's them. So you went to the Rosamundi, it's getting tidied up now, you've put in more of the idle animations, but initially it was like half a dozen OBRs standing around looking at each other.
That is quite creepy, isn't it?
Conference of Sectupstats.
Maybe we should introduce that as some sort of end game content.
No.
New Game Plus is you get to play the game, but every NPC is OBR.
You've done it now, Lottie Bevan, because what's going to happen now is the emails will come in and they'll demand the OBR.
Oh no, not emails. Please, actually, don't push for that because it will stress AK out. I'll just delete them, but AK will get stressed.
Yeah, I don't like not answering emails.
Oh no, you've got a problem.
Well, it's because I come from an age when people wrote real letters.
Yeah.
And if somebody wrote you a handwritten letter you didn't write back, then...
Well, that is a big deal.
Yeah, precisely.
Anywho, I think your writing's been going great. Like, you've been leading up to this and worrying about it because obviously the A feature of this game, the thing that is actually going to get people really excited about it or not, is your writing. And it's a funny old state of affairs, which is exactly what you'd expect in a game like this, that it's taken you so long to be able to get to a position. And to be clear, what you've been doing is you've been building all the actual software tooling around it, and you've been setting up everything in Unity, and you have been planning all the design up until this point, all of which enables you to go ahead and actually write beautiful words. And I was surprised when I first met you and I started learning a bit more about narrative design, how much spreadsheets and numbers underpin your text. I think it's really easy for anybody who doesn't have any background in game dev or background in design not to realise, particularly with you, how mechanical and numerical a lot of your writing is. Now, to be clear, I don't mean, and correct me if I'm saying anything insane here, but I don't mean that you procedurally generate anything or that things are not artistically pulled from your brain like an actual writer who writes actual books. But what I mean is I think you particularly, as a writer designer, have your narrative cleaves quite closely to the mechanics, and as a result I think you think about narrative in quite numerical ways before you sit down to write it. Or maybe you didn't used to do that when you started with Fallen Under.
No, it
feels quite disciplined.
It is. I'm a writer first and designer second, but I am a designer second, not a designer sixth. Probably a programmer sixth. And I guess the story I always tell is that when I first sat down to try to do something more creative with my life than writing software for fintech companies, back in 2009, I kept trying to do things a couple of years before then, and I wanted to write fiction, but every time I started writing fiction, I got the itch to do more gamey stuff. Because I've been running, RPGs for 20 years before that, and when I sat down to do more mechanical stuff, I wanted to do writing. So in the end, I did Fall in London, which was this pate-like blend of both, and one of the experiences of writing for London was I just picked the numbers that looked right and went with it. And I imagine they're still trying to sort of untangle the legacy of that, because I found out very quickly why some of the numbers in, say, MMOs are the odd angular things they are. But
and the big things, right? You don't do one bit of damage, you do 1,500 bits of damage.
And it's not 1,500, it's 1,503. But the point is that you've got sort of, you start out with basic, straightforward numbers, and then you want to manipulate them in various ways. Now, I think that's not always what you want to do. You take this to a particular extreme, and you get the paradox school of design. I play and love paradox games, but at some point you look at sort of a mess of 15 different modifiers for a dice roll or a stat, and you realise you lost track of each of the individual things that affect you. But of course, if you make it just extremely simple, if you just always have a sort of RPG style, TRPG style, well, you add D6 or 2D6 or 3D6, and that's the whole thing. That it's hard to reflect the effects of the things you're doing. So we've got a mailbag question actually relevant to this. Do you want to bring up
with the powers of magic clicking?
Someone said, do you have any advice on getting the numbers to work together? I'm a writer, so the story and setting comes easily to me, but the mechanics seem very daunting.
Thanks, Joshua. We have never worked with this anonymous writer before.
I think three really simple things. First, if you are coming to game design for the first time, don't go too deep on working out all the possible numbers. You don't want 6 tabs of spreadsheets before you've actually tried to influence anything, because it will change. What you want is nice, simple numbers. You want multiples of 5, for example, that you start plugging into your system and testing with. And then the companion to that is you want to be able to change them quickly. You don't want to define the numbers in different places scattered through your code or your
hard-coded numbers.
Hard-coded numbers. You want at the very least sort of constants you can redefine, and probably some sort of script or table or JSON where you can have changes ripple through. But it's not just about the implementation. It's also about saying these are the numbers that are taken for the sake of argument. And I've deliberately chosen easy ones for now, and then if we need to change them later, we can. It probably will. And the second bit of advice is a piece of advice I have heard from both St. Sidney of Mayor, and I've heard cited as a guidance in the glory days of Blizzard, back when they were building StarCraft, is if you want to change a number, if you want to tweak an effect, don't push it up by 10% or down by 17%, double it or halve it.
I love that rule.
Watch what the effect is, watch how it changes, and then you can always fall back to changing it by 10% or something if it's too much. But
I was surprised that it's a really good rule for art as well.
Really?
One of the best bits of advice I read about when I was desperately trying to basically learn how to be an artist was somebody had drawn some concept art for another game. I forget which game it was, some indie thing. And they said, when you are establishing depth in an image, you essentially have the foreground, the midground, and the background. And his advice was exactly the same. It was, if you're drawing an object in the foreground, make the object in the midground 50% of the size, and in the very distant background, make it 50% of the midground, because these significant jumps, I think, are quite counterintuitive to an artist who often wants to be very nuanced and very fluid about stuff. But I've certainly found that if you don't follow this advice, if you're not quite harsh with the doubling or halving rule, you can end up with a sort of melange of stuff. Nothing really stands out. Whereas if you're harsh about this stuff, you really get, without it being sort of abrasive to the viewer, it's a really good effect. So numbers underpin art too.
You're right, and I think the fundamental rule is that if you are making a change and you're nervous about making the change, you can mistake. You can mix up caution with half measures, because if you don't really want to change something you ought to, or you feel you might need to, then you'll tweak it a bit, and that won't necessarily help you, but it will make your life slightly more complicated. It's like pouring tea from a teapot. If you worry you're going to spill the tea on the table, so you just sort of slop it a bit.
I have this British example.
I was thinking that. Then that's the worst possible thing. You have to pour with confidence.
Yeah,
when you get this
for people who listen to this, presumably most of you who've never used a teapot, like, it's designed by sadists. It's designed to pour tea, but if you don't pour tea with the willful abandon of a British person who hasn't had a cup of tea in a month,
you need brio.
Then it just ends up in a sort of puddle at the base of of everything. But I suppose it serves you right for not being excited about tea. So fair enough.
So that's the thing. So start with, if you're new to all this, start with nice numbers that are easy to work with, easy multiples, because you are probably going to end up changing them, but at least give yourself the opportunity to have numbers that are easy to manage and remember to begin with. And they're also easy for your players to see and manage and understand and remember. Be ready to change them, make them easy to change, whether it's in your original design or whether it's in the implementation, and make big swinging changes and see the effects. And the third thing is, don't get too hung up on simulation. The numbers in a narrative game or a TRPG, something where they exist to give you a bit of grit and a sense that you're using resources in a way you understand. You're constantly going to have odd effects that aren't, heavy air quotes, realistic. There's a whole genre of game where they work very hard to simulate the detail of exactly whether or not the bullet will penetrate that particular kind of body armour. And where you know people might go to actual studies. You're not doing that. You're designing a system where people can, for example, succeed or fail for reasons they understand. And when you do something that changes their chances, they have a general idea how the chances are changed. So this is really a continuation of the previous point, double or half things. Don't tweak things a little bit, because if you think, well, this gives us a bit of advantage, he likes me a bit more, I know the city a bit better, I get a bit more advantage, 15%, maybe that's too much, make it 8%, oh no, it's more 12%. Nobody notices in the end, and it just makes your life more complicated. Pick some standard increments and go with them. So that's my basic starting advice.
I think there's also, I notice a lot of fiddling in games, in development that is, and I think that rule of double it, half it, move on is a really useful guideline, because I've seen so many people making games who get really focused on the one bit of the game that they feel they understand, or the bit that they enjoy, and that inevitably comes at the cost of the rest of the game. And I think this is ultimately one of the main reasons why you have so many developers who have been working on their dream game for years and years and years, and it just never comes out, because they never actually get to the bit where you're actually compiling it and putting it up on Steam, or the bit where they have to do the difficult design that didn't really work because the numbers that they set up initially 2 years ago no longer fit the brief, or whatever it is. And I'm desperately sympathetic, I'm not being critical here, but again, that sort of anything that urges you to continue, so you end up with something that is janky. Like, wasn't there that meme that was going around like a couple of months ago about like, draw it first, make it good later? And that's such a good bit of guidance for anything creative, but certainly for game dev. And it's why Agile got really popular with the whole production method, because that whole thing is about constantly be building and then iterating and building and iterating, rather than I will not show it to the world for 5 years until it is utterly perfect, like a flawless pearl, and then you put it out there and someone says I don't like it, and then you go home and get a different job.
I think this is, it's more complicated, because you can't, if you draw something and then make it good later, then if you started out with a shit drawing, you're never going to make it good. And this is one of the points about iterating, is sometimes iterating won't fix it. Iterating on something can often fix the problems. But if you started out with a substandard or a mediocre idea, it won't become a good idea. Or a good approach, unless you start over, in the same way that if you're making a biryani, if you put the wrong ingredients in at the beginning, you can add a bit more salt later or spice it more heavily to disguise the taste, but you can't just keep on sort of adding things and cooking for 3 days and eventually it'll be the best meal ever. At some point you have to say, well, we've done what we've done, ladle it into the plate or give up and run away crying. And there's a story I've told before, not on this podcast though, from a novel by Tim Powers called The Drawing of the Dark. Tim Powers, very engaging 20th century, late 20th century fantasy and historical fantasy writer. His thing was often to take historical fact and then sort of weave some supposition and alternate history around it. The Drawing of the Dark is a book about the siege of Vienna by the Turks and the occult things that were going on in Powers' account at the time. And one of the characters is a very talented painter who's been working on his last judgment on the wall in his house for a decade, and he's very talented and he's now almost blind. He keeps on working away at this thing. It's got ever finer cross hatching. And late in the book, our protagonist is casually chatting to a magician who's lamenting the fact that he can't find any signs or portents to determine how the battle's going to go. And our protagonist says, well, there's this bloke I know who's been painting the Last Judgment for years, and he's put a lot of the sort of the Turks and the Viennese in it. And the magician's like, why did you tell me this before? Of course we have to see this immediately. There'll be all kinds of revealed truth in it. And they rush down to the painter's house and they think they find he's died, but his masterpiece is complete. And it's behind a curtain, and the magician sweeps aside the curtain, and behind it is this painting of the Last Judgment the guy's been working on for a decade, hatching it ever and ever and ever more finely. And what he's done, he's hatched it so finely and in such a detailed way that the whole thing is completely illegible. It's solid black or as close to, but it makes no difference. It's just all cross-hatched, and the outline is lost to the detail. And if that's not a terrible warning for a game developer working on a game for 6 years.
It's terrifying.
I know.
The problem with it is that there are all these stories of breakout successes, particularly in indie, and those stories often are, I worked on this for 15 years. Think of Dwarf Fortress, think of RimWorld, think of Stardew Valley, 10th anniversary, I understand.
But I think I'm going to push back.
So it's the dream.
It is, but I think it's also a bit of a mistake. So
I agree, to be clear, I don't recommend this.
But I mean, even those particular examples, Eric Barone worked on Stardew Valley for 4 years, 6 years, a long time, but he wasn't a software developer when he started. He learned as he went, and I know he tore down the whole game and rebuilt it twice. The Addams brothers have been working on Dwarf Fortress for approximately a century, because they both love doing it, and it's a forever game they want to make for the rest of their life. There are studios and people that work on a game forever that's got good bones, they keep on expanding it, but I think it's quite unusual. I'm sure there will be one example, but it's quite unusual to have somebody who says, I'm going to make this game, and at the moment it's quite good, but if I keep work on it, it'll be genius. What you get is people who start making something and think, I've really got something here, now I'm going to polish it until it's not buggy.
But that's quite a finessed ability to understand the difference between those two situations.
It is.
Because you get the counter argument of Hideo Kojima said a good game released early is bad forever, or whatever it was.
It was, I think it was Mr. Nintendo actually, but same diff. It's true, but if you push out a game while it's broken or buggy, then it's ruined. But I think it is
Sorry,
really
CDPR
rare.
on the phone saying actually we fixed it. So
but they've always got to deal with the legacy of the launch of Cyberpunk, and Cyberpunk started out as a brilliant epoch-making
that's true
game,
and
with
if
lots
it had
of
been
flaws.
less ambitious and brilliant, the launch would have killed it.
And I think I understand it, because if you've been working on a game for years, or any work of art for years, and you had the vision and you're enjoying working on it, or you're committed to it, you keep thinking, well, I'm just going to another 6 months, then that will improve. And this brings us back to what you were saying at the beginning, which is that people focus on their skill sets. The writers will keep adding content.
It's so
the programmers
true.
will optimise.
It's so
the artists
true.
will put more art in.
Yeah.
The designers will iterate on the design. And it obviously it improves the game unless you screw up, but it's not transformative. You can't take a pancake, spice it sufficiently, and turn it into ambrosia. The only way you get the golden apples is if you actually pick them off the tree. You can't make an apple golden by painting it and whispering to it. I'm getting a bit recondite now.
But it's just difficult, isn't it? Because this is all woods to the trees.
Yes.
It's people doing work like the mouse continuing to kick its legs until the milk turns to butter. And I think it is so difficult to tell often, and I can't speak for other creative industries, but I bet it's the same, in what is hard work that will get you to, the success story that you deserve. What is hard work that's actually basically useless because you're an artist adding more art to the game, and that's not what the problem is with the game. And what is, something else. It's just when you're in it, it's very difficult to stand back.
Absolutely. This is our old thing about being in the business or on the business. But the other side of it, of course, is if you make 6 games in 6 years, then you will learn
got 6
things.
chances.
Well, you've got 6 chances, but also you will learn things that you won't learn if you make one game over 6 years. Because
absolutely.
you get the response and the post-launch and the sense of seeing it from the outside. Yeah. And so if you work too long on one game, you are forgoing one work of art. I haven't made a film. I've only written one novel and it wasn't very good. But so I see the supplies. But if you keep on toiling away at it, you're not likely to change the fundamental nature of it. You can't turn a dog into a wolf by grooming it.
You're full of your...
I am. It's the writing I've been doing all week.
He has been more lyrical this week. I've noticed it. But no, this is
what have you been doing this week?
Well, so this is why Weather Factory is a sort of iterative, weird, jagged, non-polished, interesting studio. So of course we have this philosophy, but I agree with you, obviously. Speaking of complicated long-term things that you don't know what
I
you're
wish
doing,
you could see her face.
I have been doing a lot of animation, which I've actually not that I didn't respect it before, but I think people have to be actually clinically mad to want to be animators, because I've always loved drawing and associated arts, but I've never particularly been that interested in learning to animate. So this is the first project that I've been doing that.
You're slightly underselling yourself. You have done animations before; they've been much simpler, and they've been sort of
frame animations though, which not really
yeah.
animation. Whereas this is actual animation. So we're using a program called Spine, which I'm increasingly impressed with. Everyone speaks very highly of it, but the more I use it, the more I realise how much thought has been put into it and how helpful it is if you have any idea what you're doing, which I only barely do. But yeah, I've been doing a lot of nun animations, so I feel like that's pretty cool to spend my life animating some mad Cronenbergian nuns.
We have a finite number of nuns, but they're all quite different.
Well, that's what you think. You've got infinite OBS. Why can't I have infinite nuns?
You have infinite nuns.
I'll stick them in places, and then
if
if the tree moves in the wrong way, you'll be boop nun.
That sounds great.
Right?
Yeah.
Plus 5% Steam rating. Thank you very much. No, so that is actually quite a long-winded process, as you might expect. The software is great, but you've got to, first you've got to draw it, then you've got to cut it all out in special ways, then you've got to do all the rigging. But it actually is, when you're in a flow state, quite fun, and I'm enjoying learning how to do this, which is good because I've got a whole bloody world to populate. And we've been working with some very excellent Ukrainians, but they understandably sometimes have other things they need to be doing. So we're trying to bring as much as we can in-house. And we will talk about how brilliant Adrian is, but he is
That's our Breton artist.
Yeah, but he is very much happy working in the 2D still space and doesn't particularly want to, is not an animator by trade. So yeah, a lot of learning for me.
This is always the way, isn't it? You start out rending your garments with your nails and cursing, and I quietly hide behind the door for a bit, and then after a week you're competent, and after a month you're proficient.
I will give myself the boost if I am a quick learner, but I don't know if anyone's listening to this can identify, but one of the most frustrating things in life, other than just not being immediately good at stuff that you want to do, which is just annoying. But when you are learning a new bit of software and you don't even know enough about the software to know where the button is that lets you do the thing that you want to do. So, you know, when I first started working with spine, I was like, great, how do I make the images appear in this program? Like, and I work a lot in Photoshop, which I feel very comfortable with. I've been working in that for like 20 years. So I feel like Photoshop is like my buddy. Whereas spine, initially I was like, where is the thing? I don't even know where the menu is that I can drop down to choose the thing to show me where the things are. And I will admit to getting slightly tetchy.
It's a similar experience at the very beginning of the Unity journey when you're like, okay,
Unity is
I want
mad.
to make a square move to the left,
Yeah.
right? So I just put a square in the scene. All right. What do you want the square to look? Well, would it be a square, like a 2D square? All right. So do you want a sprite renderer or do you want a mesh renderer?
Yeah.
Or I don't know. What are those things? Well, I'm glad you asked me that. Sprite renderer will render a texture through a material. What's the material? What's the thing you render a texture on? Oh, right. What's the texture?
What's it?
Well, you render it a bit.
Every so often, I still run into this idea of quads, and I run away very quickly because I don't think I'm ready for quads. It seems I have no idea what it is, but it's something to do with sort of complicated rendering, maybe 3D rendering.
My nemesis is quaternions.
What even is that?
It's so you'd think you can have like just 3 different numbers that tell you which way something's rotated.
Yeah.
But then you get gimbal lock, and you don't want gimbal locks. You need quaternions to get you around there.
I'm sorry, have I just had a stroke?
Yeah.
Nothing you said made any sense.
It's a way of expressing rotation that isn't what you learn at pre-O level, I'm showing my age, pre-GCSE maths in school.
Most people are listening are American.
But what you learn very quickly is you just hand it off to Unity and let it.
Unity is absolutely amazing. It's just like spine, but you know, times 10. The more I get comfortable using it, the more amazed I am at how much it can actually do. And of course, you know, people in the hands of a really competent person who knows what they're doing, Unity just does magic. Although I do find it comforting that even very high-level programmers who seem very comfortable and have degrees in their programming, like even they often are like, I don't know what that is or how to do that. I think that's the mark of a true programmer when they're like, I'm constantly asking the internet how to do this thing. Then I'm like, you're a real programmer.
Eventually to love the Unity layout system, but it's still
for UI.
Sometimes it's got its undocumented behaviour. Yeah.
Well, sometimes it just has a paddy and you sort of tick a box to see what it looks like and you're like, oh no, that's wrong. So you tick it back on and Unity's like, well, it's there now.
Yeah.
You've
done it, you should have thought about it.
You're like, Unity, the checkbox surely has a reversed state, and Unity's like, not anymore, love. Not anymore.
This is, we passed another sort of milestone
Unity's got
around
the
about
mink.
Christmas. It has got the mink. When we realised that we had basically solved all the technical problems that had worried us. Touch wood. That had worried us, not that exist or that might come out and bite us. And, you know, it's not a very technically ambitious game. It's got sprites that move around.
It's ambitious in every other possible
2D lighting.
way.
It's got a bunch of colliders that determine when the sprites dump into the other sprites.
Yeah.
And it's got lots and lots and lots and lots of words and images. But we hadn't
I feel it's ambitious enough though.
done much with like pathfinding before. We hadn't I'd never written a game I'd worked in a variety of dialogue systems and content editors, but I never actually sat down and done top of the day game that was this much dialogue. And we found a way to do all the things that we were worried about doing, and we think we're probably not going to end up with any gigantic textures like in Book of Hours that mean that your machine falls over bleeding from the eyes.
Yes, I do apologise.
Choking if
he's played, but that's totally my fault. I had
no
experience. Was now, firstly, I am deeply ashamed of some of the choices I made. And this is very satisfying, right? The flip side of being frustrated because you don't know where the button is that does the thing that you want to do, if you can do it at the start of learning something. Once you learn something, firstly, the curses, everything you've done previously, you're like, it's awful, I can't believe I produced that. But that's necessarily part of the learning process. But also you get tremendous satisfaction thinking, I actually know the answer to that now. So if we do end up with any significant texture issues or asset problems from the visual side, I'm absolutely not the best technical artist in the world, but I can have like a competent stab at addressing the problem because we can have a sensible conversation about it. Whereas with Book, I was a bit like, clouds are big. But they must be smaller now.
I remember the week
Please make it so.
of 2 weeks of total misery I went through after the
This was the Zoom.
This was the Zoom. This was the Zoom 2 point rather than just the Zoom in.
Yes.
And I had basically a sort of discontinuity in my brain that meant I couldn't quite get the hang of what I needed. And once I realised what we need to do is move in the direction of a point that's behind the plane you were zooming in on, then it's all projected.
But it's not immediately obvious, is it?
But it should have been more obvious. But I was very tired from.
It shouldn't have been. I mean, even the way you've just described it, then giving us the answer in a simple sentence, even that is quite an outre conclusion, which you presented as though it's an obvious answer.
I guess, but the other thing, again, the Book of Hours taught me is just if you try to do things in the simplest possible way, because you think, well, this is all a bit frightening, so I'm just going to do things intentionally naively so I understand what's going on. Often you work against the grain of the tool, whatever the tool is, Unity or something else, and you end up getting yourself deeper in trouble if you try to do things properly to begin with.
I think that's another thing, actually, working against the grain of the tool. I feel like with travelling, we're not working against it. I feel like we are working with Unity and we are working with the dialogue system and with, we got a bit told off by our animators for working against Spine. But hey, Spine's really adaptable, that's cool.
Yeah.
To be clear, the reason that was a slight issue is because we are doing something fairly unusual with the visual assets in travelling, which is that most CRPGs that are isometric tend to be a mix of 2D and 3D art. So what you normally see is almost all 2D painted textures, but they are often applied to terrain that is rendered in 3D behind the scenes, so that it is easier to tell the computer where people can go and what light should do and yada yada yada. And we're not doing any of that because we don't have any experience with 3D, and I think we're learning enough on this project, and maybe we'll come back and do another one. But as a result, we've had to slightly juggle around with some 100% 2D animations in Spine.
Juggle?
I said juggled, yeah.
All right.
You're going to juggle it, boogle it, make it fit. And we had to, and this is for Spencer's movement animations, because he has to move in 8 different directions.
And so do all his little friends.
And so do all his little friends and the little dogs too. Which, Spine is really designed, I think, primarily for sort of proper 2D platformer style movement, and you can make it as gorgeous and complicated as you like. But that's when it is really at its best, and what it doesn't really know how to do is you say, but imagine that the plane is going up a bit at a 30-degree angle, and Spine's like, I'm sorry, who are you? How did you get in?
I think you're slightly underselling yourself, because one of the reasons we chose a pure 2D approach is that your style is very much this sort of tidy, satisfying graphic design thing, and that made sense to do in this way. And also, it is much cheaper, broadly speaking, to do 2D than 3D work. But I'm glad we said it. Anyway, look, this is drifting back towards the recondite and general again. I was just thinking, so I do Friday conversation snippets. If you subscribe to this, you might or might not know this, is every Friday I will take a screen cap of something I've written that week, and I'll pop it on our Reddit, and then if we can be asked, we'll put it on social media as well. But my loathing for social media has grown to the point of almost a physical allergy. Does Reddit count as social media?
I'm afraid it does.
Well, okay, fine. It gets an exception because.
But it's our favourite one.
But so you can see some stuff about what's going on. But as I get more into the main plot, it's harder and harder to avoid spoilers. And I realised the other day we have kept it close to our chest, because one of the comments on one of the Friday conversation snippets was somebody saying, I know.
I can't wait to find out what goes on in this game.
What's actually going on, what the actual plot is.
And I got the total heebie-jeebs as the marketer and said, no one understands what this game's about, and we've got to work on communicating it better.
What they understand is it's in this world where you're doing this sort of thing and you have these sort of skills. But we will talk a bit more about the plot soon. And then it'll become apparent anyway when we get the... So we've got a public demo, probably 2 layers of public demo coming at some point this year. We'll also do some pre-release stuff with our lovely beta testers as well. But I think the demo, we'll talk more about the plot. But there's a thing that David Lynch used to say whenever he was asked about what his film was about. You know what he would always say, Lottie Bevan?
Remind me.
He'd say, it's a mystery about a woman in trouble. And
sorry, no, he'd say, it's a mystery about a woman in trouble.
That's a much better impression. and it
God
generally
bless
was. But yeah, it's a mystery about at least one woman in trouble. But you're going around Europe, you're looking for some things, and then you're doing some things with them, and you're talking to people about the things, you're doing some other things with the things, and after that you decide what things go to who with the things and what things don't. And then you might also plant some trees, and there's stuff with flowers.
Whoa. I didn't know you could plant trees.
Well, metaphorically speaking, they're blue trees. And then there's the stuff with the ink and the flowers. And also you put things inside yourself. You might put them in other people.
Sorry, love, it's a bit embarrassing when you're reading directly off the Steam page. I feel like you've got to bring your own creativity to this podcast.
Anyway, and then you're on a train.
You're not, are you? Because we decided not to do that.
But you are. I mean, you don't.
You're not on the train.
You see a red line moving on the map.
But the train moves through you.
Well, because there's some conversations I want with the companions that we were going to do originally on the train, and then we were. I thought, well, no, we'll just have them in the circus rather than need a separate train carriage. But now I'm wondering if it might be nice. No, that's scope creep. Screw it.
It is.
Screw it. No,
we can have this conversation when we are ready to launch 6 months ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
But currently, I don't believe that's where we are. So let's just get what we said we were going to do done. I've been lots of sketches. This is annoying. I've got lots of stuff that I'm very excited about showing people, but it's not ready yet. So I'm keeping like, oh, maybe I could share a sketch. And I'm like, no, Lottie, wait, because people will be much more interested in the final thing than they will in your silly little sketch. So, I've been working on... Can we talk about...
Yeah.
So I think people will be excited that you can actually enter the Mansus for the first time in physical space. Oh, no.
No, you can't enter the Mansus.
No.
But the white door is... You're on the wrong side of the white door, aren't you?
But haven't you entered the Mansus through the wood door to get to the white door?
Well, the Mansus has no walls.
Okay, so this is why I do the art.
The point is, you are
in a Mansus
space. In a Mansus space.
In an unrealistic yet traversable Mansus-y space.
Eyes, moons.
Masks. Dead people,
Yeah.
the fretful dead. The poor fretful dead,
Yes.
having a rubbish time.
Yes, it just got worse.
And there's more of them.
Yeah, trees, we talked about trees.
You're obsessed with trees.
There's a lot of trees. There's more trees in this game than there's literally anything else. I think so
Entirely Mamata's fault. The amount of time I spent, and the reason is because I've been reading a lot of Algernon Blackwood again, who I really like. But this time I've done it even better, which is AK bought me a collected works of Blackwood, because normally when I like an author, I'll just buy the whole works and I'll work my way through them. And for some authors, that's great. For some authors, it's a dreadful idea because they're very prolific and some of the quality really varies. So, everyone talks about Wordsworth being incredibly prolific, but a lot of his stuff isn't that interesting. And you get Edgar Allan Poe. I was really disappointed with when I did that technique with him. Again, not because he's any lesser writer than I thought he was. He's brilliant, but he wrote so much, all of it can't be brilliant all the time. So I ended up reading some stinkers and getting bored of them. But AK bought me this collected edition of Blackwood, which is basically just the really good ones, which I'm really enjoying. And I reread the Willows, which is one of his most famous ones. And I thought, I want Mamata to feel like the Willows. I want there to be this sort of almost sentient quality to the forest. But in order for that to be the case, certainly the way that we are animating and setting up our scenes, it means that every tree has to be individually placed. I was there, like, I care about my art. I want this feeling to be impressed upon the player. But yeah, that was a lot of trees.
I mean, I realised a little while ago that, more of our game is set in France than in any other country.
It's because we want to go to France.
It's because... yeah, that was actually why we ended up setting starting on T, because I really like working in these. But there were other reasons before. But I've been clawing my way through Simenon in my... notoriously limited French, because he wrote a lot of the Maigret novels. So Simenon, insanely prolific, great French roman policier writer who was writing for about sort of 40 years the last century with a very distinctive detective. He wrote a bunch of stuff in the 20s and the 40s, and that's great for local colour, even if it's sort of alternate France. And I went back and read the very first Peter the Latvian, and a lot of it's on trains. And I thought, oh great, this is good. And it's before Simenon worked out a lot of how we do the later plotting. So it's very enjoyable. It's mental. The spoilers, if you haven't read this book that's published about 1924. There's this international criminal called Peter the Latvian, and Meg Gray's tracking him down. He goes to find him at the station, and this little bloke with a funny moustache, who is probably Peter the Latvian, goes past him to a nice hotel. And Meg Gray's like, all right, I've got him. And then there's a sort of commotion around the train, but it turns out someone else who looks exactly like Peter the Latvian has been found dead in the toilet. And it's not clear which, if either of them was actually Peter the Latvian. So May Gray sort of cross about all this, and May Gray spends a lot of time in this novel standing around in the rain, getting grumpy and being unable to light his pipe. And then he goes off to the most viciously described seaside town I've ever seen. I think somebody must have stole Simonon's wallet when he stayed there. The whole place smells of herring. And he waits outside this house that has a connection to the case in the rain for about 6 hours. And his pipe goes out and his shoes are soaked. He's thinking longly of the stay in his office. This other bloke walks past him, and it looks like Peter the Latvian. And there's a third bloke! So there's at least 3 people wandering around the book, one of them dead now, who look like Peter the Latvian. We're not sure whether they were actually Peter the Latvian or...
Did you finish the book? Do you
not yet,
know?
no. Well, you know, my French is poor and I read very slowly, but I'm enjoying it. So... Blackwood and Simonal. Yeah, about enclosure, nuns. You do, because you have to draw some of the things, don't you? I didn't realise how seriously Catholic nuns took enclosure, because obviously you've got to be tucked away.
What, this is the
world.
stopping you talking to anyone outside of...
Yeah, so you've got to talk to them through the grill. And they can't come in. You know, even if they're a doctor, they probably can't come in unless it's a real emergency. And what really got me was a sort of rotary dumbwaiter thing in the wall.
We've seen one of them when we were in, was it Granada we went to with the Alhambra?
Yeah.
And we walked all the way up to the old town, and there was an old nunnery there, so I basically made us trek all the way up in the hot noonday sun to go see the nunnery.
Yes!
And it was, I think it's abandoned, but recently abandoned, so everything was as it was and it hadn't yet been used for anything else. I don't even know if you still do use nunneries for other things. And it had exactly this sort of little this little sort of hatch in the wall, which was just big enough for basically a human head to be oiked out, and next to it was a sort of ornate bell with some sort of beautiful cross next to it, which you pull a rope and say, basically, please, can I speak to the nuns? And the most worldly of the sisters presumably would appear and say, go away, we don't want what you're selling. It's fascinating.
The other thing I was really up on, I just had to check, it was Carthusians or Benedictines, and it is Carthusians. Chartreuse, that green stuff that you put in cocktails, it's about 50 different kinds of herbs. And... because this is, again, herbal liqueurs are relevant to our nuns. And I had not known or forgotten that the recipe for Chartreuse is allegedly so secret that only 2 monks know at any time. And I think each of the monks only knows half of it.
Oh my God, I love it.
Yeah.
I suppose, you know what, they got quite a lot of time, quite fun to... Isn't Frangelico also famously brewed by monks?
I mean,
that's why it comes in the beautiful monk bottle with the rope.
I guess it probably is.
The rope sash. Ugh, I want a drink. It's a Friday. So this is a sad thing. We record this on a Friday because, then we have... And
you're hearing it on Monday through the magic of time travel.
Well, I know, but that's sad because what I want to say is, happy Friday, everybody, whoop whoop, end of the week. But of course, everyone's listening to it on Monday, which famously is not the most happy day of the week.
Well, happy March. That's nearly spring. We can say that.
That's true. It is pretty springy, although who knows where people are listening to this from. I had a video from one of our friends who lives in Canada a couple of days ago, and that was extremely snowy and did not look remotely springy, but they get lots of snow. So
it stopped raining now. I think we told people last time it'd be raining a bit for something like 38 days, and we've actually had some nearly clear skies. I want to ask, there's another question I want to answer, a mailbag question, just because it's been on the docket since January and I feel bad about neglecting it for a medical student.
You see, this goes back to anytime we get an email, Alexis has to answer it.
Yeah.
But yes, it's a good question from Ben.
Do you want to read it?
As a final year medical student, I'm excited by the prospect of playing as someone with a medical background. As you know, if you don't, you can have a physician background in travelling at night. It's always interesting to me to see how medicine can be incorporated into a character beyond the +5 to healing, and I'd love to know if there's anything about medicine that inspires you towards the occult and why a medical education was chosen as part of Spencer's background.
So
Good question.
It's 3. This is the 3rd game which I've wanted to do more stuff with medicine in, and basically ended up not doing much with it, because medicine in games, like the guy said, tends to be you top up your hit points, and it's pretty much like having a sort of barrel of healing that you squirt into somebody's hit points. Sometimes you cure disease or curse. There are games that do more than this. There are games that make it the whole thing, where you've got to solve a series of problems or diagnose people.
Well, it presumably comes out of the fact that most games rely on combat of some kind, so healing is an adjunct of the main event, whereas few games put healing or medicine in as the main event and then have combat as a result of that, if you see what I mean.
And you're right, and more than that, nobody in the real world survives as much combat as as PCs and RPGs do. You know, if you're in a gang in an anarchic city, then you still don't, because you know you get shot and then you
and that's
die,
it.
or your wound gets infected. You know, soldiers don't see as much combat unless they're fighting in a sort of total war as the average RPG, where you're sort of steadily spooning up orcs. And if you've got constant combat, people getting wounded and then recovering, then you need, whether the healing is actually magic or not, you need it to happen damn quickly. And the whole point about healing the real world is it takes flipping time.
Yeah.
So as soon as you've got any sort of insta-cure, it means that it's very hard to do any of the complexities or problem solving.
I suppose it's like fast travel when you put it like that.
That's a really good way of thinking about it. So in Cultist, I had this idea, which I backed off from, of what if, in your physician background, there are a variety of different things that you address, the variety of different skills and techniques that had trade-offs. This is one of the things about medicine, is you've got trade-offs. You don't know if things will work or not. And I didn't do that just because we made Cultist in the end about 11 months and didn't have much time. Book of Hours, I wanted to do more with healing because there's a place of healing. And again, we never really did. If we do a third DLC, and we say it's unlikely we'll do a second for Book of Hours, then I'd like to do something with that. But this was one of the origins of the soul parts that I put in Book of Hours, because I thought what I wanted to do was take some of the sense of the complexity of fixing the human body and mind and transpose it into something that didn't need to be realistic but could feel parallel or analogous to it. So if you are aphasic, that's because your shaft is wounded. If you your dreams overcome you during daylight, that's because your fet, the part of the spirit that wanders the Mansus, is overactive. So it's a bit like a humours system.
I was just thinking of the humours. I've
Exactly.
always liked them.
That was one of the big inspirations. Another part, obviously, was the Egyptian soul parts, and I thought, can we do something with that? And there's a little bit of that in Book of Hours, because you get contamination from different books that you heal in different ways with different aspects. So that was a sketch towards it. I wanted to do more. I wanted to have your visitors come to you and say, I'm weeping black ichor out of my nose. What can you do about it? And you'd say, well, let me try these 4 different approaches.
You know, I'd quite like a game that just focused on that, though. I
Yeah.
think it's so interesting that it deserves its own scene rather than to be
and
inserted.
I agree. There are some good ones out there, but it is, because it is so complicated, hard to fit satisfying in a game. So to bring it back to Book of Hours, you got it's. What was the question? It'd be interesting to see how medicine can be incorporated into character beyond +5 to healing. I think the answer is, it's quite low key in travelling, is that you're thinking of using preservation or some of your other occult skills to address particular problems, and crafting things that you can use to address particular problems. And because you don't have a there isn't a wound stat, there is a, what did you call it in the end? Pain, I think. Generic pain. So
pain.
You can bring that down with some of the items, but there's a bit more flex in it. But the answer is not that much, except of course that as a doctor, even though you're not a doctor, you're a medical student to abandon their studies, but that can get you into some places.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think there will be contextual, what are we calling them, modulations?
Modifiers.
Contextual modifiers. I've been blown away by when a CRPG particularly does something that makes me feel like the game is listening to me as a human rather than as a system of numbers behind the scenes. I certainly find that very powerful. So the example I always give is in Disco Elysium. Obviously, if you have a high skill in X and then you do a dice roll against X, then you win, right? That's satisfying too, and you get how it works, and it's like CRPGs at their core, right? But for the first time, certainly I had seen in Disco, modifiers that reflected more squoogey narrative choices. So, for example, if I had a certain item in my inventory, I'm not going to give you any spoilers for anyone who hasn't played the game, but when you come to make a deduction about something similar but not the same as what you have in your inventory, you get a really significant boost to your chance of success if you've picked up that item. And bearing in mind it's not a particularly linear game, it felt very rewarding for it to say, actually, you could not have this, in which case you don't get a negative effect, because it's not like you failed to investigate something, but you just don't have anything that would particularly help you. But if you have picked up this item and now you're getting this chance to deduce something about something similar, having this item to compare this other bit of evidence to will immediately make that deduction much easier. And it sounds really simple, but it's it just felt like I was talking to a human, and the human might say, oh, I see, because, I know yesterday that you ate an orange, so today when I gave you this orange, you were able to say, oh, that was a nicer orange than yesterday, in a way that a sort of database is much better at saying, I see that your orange skill is +5 and this test is +7, and therefore you've got a good chance of making it. And this is, and so to bring that ramble to a close, I think this is where Spencer's backgrounds will come into it a bit more. So I know that, again, back to the nuns, one of the other backgrounds that Spencer can have is to have been a priest briefly. So I think he has a few dialogue options that are specific to his priestly background with these nuns, and presumably he will have another set of...
So it doesn't work quite that way, in fact. Your backgrounds determine which skills it's easy to acquire, and if you're a priest or a physician by inclination, you've probably got a high dignity. So dignity is more useful for impressing nuns than charming.
So you can't be like, I was friar of made up.
Well, so you can be, but what you do is you use your dignity skill to establish that, because Spencer has the same CV. It's just which part of it is most important to him. Because in fact, I think there is one bit left in early dialogue where you do have a dialogue option that is open to you specifically.
Yeah, I'm sure that I've seen this.
There is,
but
the reason I backed off it is because it's sort of doubled up, because I realised that if you're a physician build or a priest build, you would probably have exorcist rather than priest. You'd have a high dignity anyway, so it felt unnecessary. It felt like it was locking out people who didn't have that background, but did want to enhance it. And it meant another level of complexity, because there's a whole bunch of things that are unlocked. I think you mentioned the DE phrase. This is the point in the podcast which we say we are not a disco successor. We are not pretending to throw in a disco. We are doing our own extremely different thing. Your skills don't talk to you in our game, but disco as an excellent game and seminal in the genre. The three things we've taken from it are: uno, no combat in the game, because we were like, oh yeah, you can do an RPG with no combat. Why has no one really done that before? Lots of games with no combat, not one that feels like an RPG. 2, vertical column-based text. It's just an easier layout and it privileges it. 3, underrated, I think, modifiers. It's really surprising to me in hindsight how few CRPGs have done visible narrative modifiers, because TRPGs, which are all our common cousin, it's very common for you, the GM to say, roll a d20 and let's give you a +2, because this is the 5th time you've been trying to get through.
That's a much better example of what I was trying to say before.
And you said it's human, not a system of numbers, and I think it is a system of numbers, but it's not just a system of numbers.
But it feels like a human.
It does, exactly, because you've got these very light touch things where you can say to the content system, if there's this variable present in however attenuated a way, then let's chuck a number in and just give a single phrase that explains why it's relevant. So it does feel like the game's listening to you, you're absolutely right. And it also provides a nice sort of sidebar recap of what you've been up to.
Well, I think we should leave it there.
I think we should. It's 5 o'clock.
I know.
Well, we need a tea.
No, we need a drink.
Yes.
But we will leave you with good thoughts because it's nuns. So don't have a drink, don't do anything fun, just be holy and
think about the unconquered sun.
Pray for this game. Have a spooky day.